Hey guys, welcome back to another vlog or another video because this one is not going to be a vlog. Today I thought that I would do a chit chat get ready with me while I tell you guys my labor story. I thought I would make it a chit chat get ready with me because just so instead of like me just sitting here talking about my labor experience, it would give you guys something also to watch. So watch me do my makeup. And I'm not going to be saying what I'm using because that's not really what the video is about. But if you do have any questions, want to know what products I'm using, then you can just ask me in the comments and I will reply with whatever product I'm using. So yeah, I think you can see in the mirror behind me, Gabby is on her swing right now. She is sleeping. She just fell asleep. So hopefully she stays asleep the whole time, but we'll see. But yeah, so my labor experience. First of all, I'm 22 years old and I gave birth to my daughter September 8th, 2024. Once I found out that I was pregnant, at first I was a little scared and I was anxious, but then I quickly became excited and I never was scared about labor. I never really even thought about it much because I didn't want to scare myself or psych myself out. I wanted to go in optimistic. So I started to go into labor 2 days before I actually gave birth. I started to feel labor contractions Friday night. I started to have very mild contractions during the night, but they were so mild that I knew that I wasn't anywhere near the time of actually giving birth. So I ended up just going to sleep and they went away. In the morning I woke up and I didn't even feel them anymore. But later on I started to feel them again. But again, they were super light. So I knew that it wasn't really time. I didn't want to go to the hospital. I was just kind of chilling. But then when I was in the shower, I felt my water break, I'm sorry. And it wasn't a lot of water, so I was kind of confused. I was like, wait, did my water even break? Like, what's going on? Because it wasn't a lot of water. But then I searched it up on Google. Shout out Google, because Google really helped me out during my labor. I Googled it, and it turns out that some people break their water slowly. And I didn't know that, but I was like, okay, I think that's what's happening to me because I definitely feel water coming out, but it's coming out slowly. It wasn't like initially it was like a pretty big gush, but not enough. From what I've seen, like in movies and stuff, it wasn't that much water. But when I got out of the shower, my water kept breaking. Like I felt more water coming out and stuff, so I was like, all right. I know my water's breaking. And I was like, should I go to the hospital right now? I was so confused because I was like, I don't even feel pain. Like I'm feeling cramps, but they're super light. Like they're not even as bad as like my period cramps were. Like they're not even the worst period cramps I've ever had. And I've heard that, you know, when you're having contractions, they're like really bad period cramps. And I was like, I'm feeling cramps, but they're not that bad. So I was just chilling, but my husband was very anxious. He wanted to go like immediately, and I was telling him like, no, it's not time, you know, I really want to labor as much as I can at home. But eventually I ended up going because what happened? I ended up going because I Googled when should I go to the hospital if I'm in labor, and it said if your water breaks, you should go to the hospital because that is the barrier that doesn't allow bacteria to enter, and now that your water's broken, bacteria can more easily enter, so it's dangerous. You should be monitored by somebody, you know, a doctor. So I was like, all right, let's go. And then I started to get super nervous. I started to feel like, oh my God, I can't give birth. Like, it's not time. I don't feel ready. You know, I knew that I was gonna end up feeling very anxious about it. But I knew also I had to go just because I felt more comfortable being monitored by a doctor if my water broke. So we eventually went. I was very glad that I went to the doctor, or I went to the hospital, or I started labor very early in the day. It was, I think at this point it was like 10 a.m., around 10 a.m. when I checked into the hospital. And it was so funny because like, you know, whenever you see like movies of people going into labor, it's so like frantic, and they're like rushing, they're like in so much pain. They go to the hospital like, oh my god, like I'm giving birth, like I need a doctor. But it wasn't like that for me at all. I just walked in and was like, hey, I'm here to check in because I'm in labor. I think they asked me like, how do I know I'm in labor? Okay, sorry about that, my battery died. I'm sorry if the lighting changed and if the positioning changed. But yeah, where was I? Oh, right. So I think they asked me like how I know I was in labor, or they were like, are you having contractions or what's going on? And I told her I'm having I was having mild contractions. When I actually got to the hospital, I didn't really feel anything anymore. They were like coming and going, but it was like it barely hurt, or it just felt like very slightly uncomfortable. So it really wasn't anything crazy. So I told her that my water broke, and she was like, okay, yeah, let's get you checked in. And they got me checked in. And at first I went to like this waiting room where they were going to put in my IV and check how many centimeters dilated I was. So this is where it got difficult. So first they checked how many centimeters dilated I was. I was only half a centimeter dilated. I was 0.5 centimeters dilated. And when I heard that, I was like, dang it. Like, I really wish my water hadn't broken. I really wish I could have labored way more at home, because I knew that it was gonna be a long time before I gave birth. By the way, it didn't hurt when they checked my cervix. I know for some people it really hurts. And I know that I was nervous about that. That was actually my first time I ever had my cervix checked, because I denied it in my doctor's appointments previously. Because I wasn't having any contractions and I wasn't really feeling anything, my doctor was like, we don't really need to check your cervix if you don't want. And I was like, no, thank you. If you don't have to, please don't. Because I had heard that for so many people it was painful. But for me, when they checked it, it wasn't painful. I didn't really feel, obviously I felt the pressure of her being down there, but I didn't feel any pain or discomfort even. So yeah, if you're worried about that, it doesn't hurt for everyone, so maybe it won't hurt for you. However, when this nurse put in my IV, that is what hurt. The actual initial putting it in didn't hurt. It just felt like, you know, if you're getting like a shot, that didn't really hurt. But after a while of the IV being in, my arm in the area where the IV was put in was starting to hurt so bad. Thank God my mother-in-law was there, because I was asking her, I was like, hey, is it normal for my IV to hurt this bad? And she said, no, that shouldn't be the case. It maybe should feel a little uncomfortable, but not it hurting. And it hurt really bad. So she was like, ask the nurse, let her know. And so I told the nurse that my IV was hurting, and she said, oh yeah, that's normal to feel a little discomfort, because that's where the needle went in and whatever. So I was just like, okay, I guess. But thank God that nurse left. Her shift ended and a new one came in, because when I told this new nurse that my IV was hurting really bad, like at this point, the contractions were starting to hurt more. And my IV was hurting more than my contractions. My contractions hurt, but that IV hurt way more. So I told my new nurse that, and she was like, oh, that shouldn't be the case. That's not normal. Like, let's take that IV out and put it in your other arm. And she did, and that brought me so much relief. I felt so much better, because that thing hurt. And even when she took it out, there was like really big bruises on my arms. And I had talked to other mothers, and this is like happened to them too. So that sucks. You know, I don't know, like, did the nurse not put it in right or what happened? But this new nurse that came, she was amazing, and she fixed it and put it in my other arm, and it felt so much better. And at that point I felt better. Like, the contractions were still hurting me, but I didn't even care. I cared about the IV. My arm was still sore though after that for a while. Like, I'm talking about like a week after, my arm was still sore from that IV. Then my contractions started to hurt more. At this point I was like 5 centimeters dilated, 4 or 5 centimeters dilated, and my contractions were starting to hurt a lot more. So I got the epidural. I always knew that I was gonna get the epidural. I just had pretty much, I didn't know what the pain was gonna be like, but I didn't want it to get worse. Like, honestly, the point that I was at, it was pretty bearable. Like, it's like if that was the most it was gonna hurt, then that's like, it was easy. But I knew it was gonna get worse and worse and worse. So I was like, no, I don't want to feel any more pain, so let me just get the epidural. I got the epidural, literally all the pain went away, and I also, oh yeah, the epidural didn't hurt. Getting it didn't hurt. For me, it didn't hurt. It pinched a little bit, but when it did hurt, I told him like, oh, that hurts, and he adjusted it, and then it didn't hurt at all anymore, and then it was over. So yeah, if you're scared of the epidural, don't be. Like, it really, like, that is the most minimal part. I don't really even think about it anymore because it was so quick. It happened so quick. And the little tiny pinch that I felt was nothing compared to like the contractions that kept coming and going, coming and going. And after a while, you just get tired of it. Like, it's not even like, for me, it wasn't that it hurt a lot. It was just like, I'm tired of this. Like, I'm worn, because it will like it feels like cramps. It felt like a really intense period cramp. People describe it that way, and for me, it was very accurate. It was very much just like a super intense period cramp that just gets stronger as time goes by. So then there was just like a stall. I wasn't dilating, so they had to give me, what is that thing? Pitocin, the drug that, like, what is it called? Gets you to dilate faster, induces you. It induces you so that you are dilating faster and things are moving along. They gave me Pitocin, but hours and hours and hours went by and I was not hitting 10 centimeters dilated. It was taking forever. But I just slept that whole time. So at this point, I think it was like nighttime. I had been there the whole day and I was still not 10 centimeters dilated. So they just let me sleep. I was just resting. My husband and my mother-in-law were in the room. And yeah, I just kept resting. The doctors kept coming in and out to check on me. And that is when I randomly started to cough, like uncontrollably, and my throat started to hurt. So yes, I got sick. I got sick at the hospital and I was starting to feel terrible. I got like a fever out of nowhere. Yep, a fever. And they started to monitor me because they were like, what the heck is going on? You have a fever, your blood pressure is rising, and your babies have a fever now too. And it was just so weird because I just got sick out of nowhere. And it happened so fast. And I was so scared that it was COVID because I didn't know if, like, I was scared that if I had COVID, they were gonna have to quarantine me for my baby, like, right away. I was so scared of that happening. I started to get, like, scared. But they tested me for COVID and I came out negative, thank God. But I still had a fever. And I was still feeling terrible. I kept coughing. I was drinking tea. My mother-in-law went to go get me like cough drops. Those helped a lot. It was just weird. And then finally I hit 10 centimeters dilated, but then there was another problem. I had hit 10 centimeters dilated, but she had not dropped. So she was like right at my, I don't know. She was like there, but she wasn't at the position low enough to where she needs to be for me to push. She was big for me. And even the doctor was like, this is a big baby for you. For reference, I'm 4'11". And she came out to be 7 pounds, 12 ounces. So she was almost 8 pounds, which I was not expecting that. Even in her 23-week anatomy scan, she was measuring smaller than average, but my doctor was like, that's pretty normal considering that me and my husband are pretty small people. Like, I'm 4'11", he's like 5'7" or 5, yeah, I think like 5'7". So we're like not really big people. So she was like, that's normal. She's coming a little bit below average. So I was thinking I was gonna have like a 6-pound baby, 7-pound max. But yeah, she was bigger than expected. And so because of that, she was not making her way down to where she needed to be. And they were putting me in different positions, doing everything to get her to fall down. But she just never went down to where she needed to be. And eventually I had to start pushing without her being in the position that she needed to be. So yes, I started pushing. I started pushing and pushing and pushing. And oh my goodness. So people like, they tell me about the pain of the contractions. They tell me like, oh, like the epidural might sting a little bit. But I don't know why I never heard people talk about how freaking tired you get pushing. Granted, I was pushing for an hour and a half, which is like not that common. Like that's a long time to be pushing. But I had never really heard anybody say anything. Maybe they didn't, you know, have to push for that long. But because she was not down at my pelvis yet, I had to push for a really long time, and it was so tiring. And the nurse kept telling me that I was pushing wrong. And I was like, what? Like, how do I even push? She kept saying, push like you're pooping. You know, I just felt pressure, but I didn't feel like where I was pushing. I didn't know how I was pushing wrong. And she just kept telling me I was pushing wrong, but she wasn't telling me how. Like, the only thing she would say is like, push like you're pooping. And I'm like, that's not helping me. I don't know how to do that. But I was so like tired, and that I didn't really like say much. I was just like pushing with all my strength. But at least if you're like me and you have to push for a long time, the epidural is not helping that. If anything, the epidural is making that worse. And you're gonna have to feel like the pressure of needing to push, not being able to push this baby out, and you're gonna feel tired, you're gonna feel like exhausted, and there's nothing to keep you from that. I don't know, some people like, they say that it's like, oh, 2 pushes and he was out, and the baby was out. Not me. I was pushing and I was pushing, and I felt the effects of me pushing wrong, because after I gave birth, my arms were so sore from how tight and how much tension there was in my arms when I was pushing. So I know I was pushing wrong, but I also didn't know how to push right. But then it gets even more interesting. Finally, after so much time pushing, she's coming out. And I remember that when they were able to see the head, they asked me if I wanted a mirror to see like her head. And I was like, no, thank you. I don't want to see anywhere down there. My mother-in-law and my husband were all up in down there looking at everything, but I did not want to see that at all. I know it was going to freak me out because I'm not good with blood. So I was like, no, thank you, but you have that option if you want. Finally, she came out, but she wasn't breathing because she had swallowed blood on her way out. She wasn't breathing, so immediately they had to bring like the doctors, the baby doctors, to help her. So she was immediately taken away from me, which was sad, but I got to see like a little glimpse of her. They got her to breathe, and then they put her on my chest for a very short amount of time, like 5 minutes. While I was pushing, she wasn't coming out, so they had to cut me, and I ended up having a 2nd-degree tear. I had to do that, which was fine, and they put my baby on my chest for like a very short amount of time. I was so overwhelmed. I was so happy. I was mainly just so like, oh my god, relieved. Like, it's over. I have my baby. She's there. And it was like the cutest little, most precious thing ever. Like, she was crying, and her cry was so little, and I was just happy that she was okay, you know. She was born with a fever, unfortunately, and she did have to get taken to the NICU because she swallowed blood. She had a fever. They wanted to make sure the blood wasn't infected. So she was only able to be on my chest for 5 minutes, and then she was taken away. But another thing that happened is that while my doctor was stitching me up, she noticed that I also tore on my sides, and my cervix tore, which is a super rare tear that occurs during labor. So unfortunately, I had to get immediately rushed into surgery, and it happened so fast. No one was really explaining to me what was going on. My doctor told me, hey, you have a tear like in your cervix, so we're actually gonna have to take you to the OR so we can see better and more clearly and be able to stitch you up. But that's all she said, and then everyone was rushing everywhere, and I didn't know what was going on in the moment. I didn't realize how rare it was or how dangerous it was for your cervix to tear, because you lose so much blood after just giving birth. It's not good. But in the moment, I was just so freaked out. I was sad because my baby was taken away, and then they were rushing me to the OR. I was crying. I felt so overwhelmed and so helpless, and I was also like, you know, where's my baby? Like, what's going on? Because they didn't, like, they were explaining to me what was happening, but I just gave birth. Like, my mind wasn't there. Like, I was so confused, even though they were explaining it to me. So I got immediately taken to the OR. They numbed my whole body. I was still wide awake while they were operating on me, but my body was just numb, and I was just crying. And they kept asking me, are you okay? And I was just like, yeah, like, I mean, I guess. But I was crying because I was so overwhelmed. You know, it's like a very overwhelming thing to go through. And then I started to feel very nauseous, which apparently happens, and people that have had C-sections have told me about this, that yeah, like the anesthesia makes you very nauseous. So I was like gagging, I was dry heaving, I was like throwing up and nothing was coming out. And then my doctor gave me something for that, but it didn't really work, so then he had to give me more. And that's whenever he gave me that last dose, that's when I went out of it. I was like high. And I got taken back to my room. Finally, the surgery was over. I felt them put a bunch of gauze up me, okay? But I was still numb, so it just felt like pressure. But then eventually they had to take me off the anesthesia once they were done with the surgery. So they took me off of that, and then they took me back to my room. And then that's when I felt all of the pain hit me like a truck. It was like slightly numbed because of the drugs that they gave me, but I started to feel everything in me that they put like gauze up there. It was so uncomfortable, it hurt so bad. That's when I started crying a lot, because I was like, I'm overwhelmed, first of all, because they just brought me back, but like also I'm out of it, and also where's my baby? But I felt the pain, and it hurt really bad because they had removed the epidural at this point. And the doctors gave me more of the medicine, or like the drug, whatever it is, I don't know what it's called, but it made me high, and it puts you to sleep. And then I woke up, and when I woke up, I was still in the room where I gave birth. And they were telling me that they're gonna move me soon into my recovery room. But man, that gauze that they put in me was so uncomfortable for so long, until finally they took it out. But it was like, it was not fun. And luckily, she wasn't in the NICU for that long. She was there for like 2 days, and then they brought her back to me. So I really feel though for the moms whose babies have to be taken to the NICU for longer, like that's so heartbreaking. Even being away from my baby for those 2 days was really stressful, and I felt really sad. Give me 1 second, I'm just gonna get the lip that I'm gonna be wearing. All right, so I just finished my makeup. This is the finished look. By the way, I forgot to mention, but I am now 3 months postpartum, 3 months and a couple days postpartum. And I'm going to make another video talking about my postpartum experience. That's why I'm going to end it here, because if not, this video would be like an hour long, literally, because I have a lot more to say about postpartum than my actual labor. This has been my labor story. All in all I can say is I'm so thankful to God that everything was fine at the end of the day. Yes, you know, I had 4 tears. Yes, she was born with a fever. I had a fever. I had high blood pressure, and I had to be taken to the OR immediately. But God was there with me every single step of the way. Very thankful for my family. My dad, when he heard of like what was going on with the labor and how it was difficult, he was praying for me, you know, with people from his church, and I was just so grateful. So God's hand was with me, and I didn't even, like, yeah, I was like feeling, you know, worried, and not even worried, just more overwhelmed and sad. But I was literally still at the same time like weirdly like at peace, and I just had joy because I knew that everything was gonna work out okay. I knew God was with me. I knew he was going to be with my daughter, and at the end of the day, everything was okay. And if you're nervous about giving birth, don't be. You know, even if the worst things happen, like God is with you through it all. And for most people, their labor turns out totally fine, and even if it's not perfect, at the end of the day, like, what matters is that you and your baby are alive and you guys are okay, and that God is in the midst of everything. So if you are nervous, don't be. Go into it knowing that God will sustain you. But yes, that was my labor story. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like. that will let me know that you want me to do a chit chat get ready with me while I tell you my postpartum experience, because I have a lot to say about that. Labor happened so fast. Look, labor was over 24 hours for me, yet in my mind it happened so fast. It flew by. I couldn't even feel the time. So it was like such a blur. But postpartum, like I feel like I'm still dealing with postpartum. So I definitely have a lot to say about that. So let me know down below that you want me to hear that video, or just give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.